After a week off from the podcast from being absolutely dead, that being me, we are back post rivalry week. We just got the next to last playoff rankings before we find out the actual playoff next week. We got a lot to talk about. Game picks have finished for the season. We'll talk about who won those. Coming up tonight, we will talk about postseason picks. We will talk about conference championships this Saturday and Friday. There's some on Friday. And we'll talk about who's going to the playoff right here, right now.
Go.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the From the Student Section podcast. As you can tell, my voice still isn't all the way back yet. I was sick all last week. That's why you didn't get a podcast from us last week. I apologize for that. But I just could not have possibly done it last week in my condition. As you can tell, my voice is still a little gone, but I wanted to get the podcast out for you guys. So Austin's going to be doing a lot of the talking here today, but that's okay. He's here to help us out as always. What's up, buddy? Welcome back. How we doing? How we feeling? Excuse me. Looks like he froze a little bit. That's okay. We're going to keep plugging along as we always do when there's technical difficulties. So we'll get back to him in just a second. As always, thank you for supporting the podcast. As always, I can tell you just got back from being frozen. That's okay.
Here's the thing. It just happened again, like it did earlier. I've heard you talking the entire time.
Okay, well, so regardless, the recording will hear me. You'll just be a little frozen for it, but that's okay. We're gonna keep this thing going because we got a long way to go. But let's go ahead and jump right into talking about Week 13, Rivalry Week. As always, sponsored by Prime Hydration.
Let's go,
podcast
baby.
Sponsored by Prime, as always. You see it right here behind me. Let's start off Thursday night with the Egg Bowl. This is always a fun game, and it was no different this year. Mississippi State beats Ole Miss by 2. Just a collapse by Ole Miss to end the year. Really tough for them. I will be interested to see how they play in a bowl game. But yeah, after LSU and Alabama, they just didn't have a lot left. Jackson Dart played a great game. Will Rogers played a great game. Overall, great classic game from both teams. The Mississippi teams always show out regardless of how well they're playing. This game was a lot of fun and big win for Mississippi State.
Yeah, I agree. Great game from Will Rogers and Jackson Dart. Quinshon Judkins had a good game. Jaquavius Marks had a pretty good game, as did Dylan Johnson from Mississippi State. Yeah, I mean, it was really, I mean, you see there's one rushing touchdown for Mississippi State with Jaquavius Marks, and then obviously Will Rogers had 2 touchdowns with 1 interception.
Yep.
And then Jackson Dart had 2 touchdown passes. There were no rushing touchdowns. So, I mean, it was a pretty big passing game. I'd say a lot of the points were scored, but I mean, great game for both teams. But yeah, Ole Miss really collapsing, towards the end of the season. They were looking really good. A lot of people thought they could get into the playoff or, at least make a run for, for a conference championship. But, those losses they had in the later weeks and as we see with this game, just couldn't get the job done. I think they're in a good place. I think that with some recruits and with the continued experience, I think they'll be, right back where they are next year and maybe even better. So, I mean, good season for them. It wasn't all a waste. I think they're going to go to a bowl game. But yeah, I mean, good season for both teams overall, for the regular season. So,
there's a lot of talk about Lane Kiffin and does he stay with Ole Miss? There's a lot of good head coaching vacancies in the college world and in the NFL world. So there's a lot of people wondering if he goes, if he stays. I think he may stick around. I think he'll stick around for at least another year. See what we can do with Ole Miss because he has been getting a lot of good recruits for that team. I think they just got to get some final pieces to fall into place, and they could be a contender going forward. They always make some noise. They've been consistent every year for the past couple of years. So it's be fun to watch as they continue to progress.
I agree.
Florida State, man, they've been looking on fire. They have been on fire for the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. It sucks that they lost and they faced Clemson early and lost early. Faced a lot of those really good ACC teams and lost early because, man, I'd hate to see them play Clemson now because this Florida State team is looking unstoppable. Jordan Travis, not a great game for him, but it was more than enough. Trey Benson carried literally 20 carries for 111 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Jordan Travis with 83 yards and 2 touchdowns. Man, what a rush heavy game for Florida State. What a big win for them. Anthony Richardson, not a great stat line, but somehow still had 3 touchdowns. I don't know how that happened, but big win for Florida State. Florida, though, still bowl eligible. Be great to see from them. But yeah, Florida State, they'll get a good bowl game. I think they're like either third or fourth in the ACC. So they'll get a good bowl game and face a good team.
Yeah. I actually watched about half of this game or so, maybe a little bit less. Man, what a game. I remember at one point, he said the scores. Let me say, so it was 14. So it was 24 at halftime. So it was in the third quarter that I joined in, and oh my goodness. I mean, Florida State was up by several scores, and I was thinking, oh man, Florida's going to have, they're not going to come back. And then I remember, I think I was doing some other stuff, doing Specs Box, or doing whatever. I turned back on the game, and it was tied. And I was like, holy cow. And then obviously Florida State scores early in the fourth quarter for great play. And then Florida just they're coming down the field trying to tie it up. And I mean,
looks like I lost him again briefly.
I can still hear you.
Yeah, I know, you're good. You're back.
Okay.
Last thing you said, Florida State had taken the lead. Florida was driving down.
I was saying, Anthony Richardson was leading that team down the field. They were passing the ball well. They're getting 10, 15, 20-yard passes left and right. I mean, it looked like a game of Madden. They're going back and forth. They're getting great plays down the sideline to stop the clock. But penalties was a big thing for them, and just with how crazy and loud that those Florida State fans are, it was just too much for them. They couldn't get the job done at turning it over, and Florida State ended up, taking a couple knees and running out the clock. Great game though overall. Not amazing stat lines for the quarterbacks, but those stat lines don't do the game justice. You would have to watch it to see. Both quarterbacks played great. Both teams played great. It was an amazing game. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. But props to Florida State for getting a big win.
No matter how good or bad the teams are, rivalry week always delivers. Teams always play their best against each other, especially the top tier of college football. And that's what we saw this week from an epic rivalry week. Moving on here, looking else at what other games we got here. NC State gets a big win over North Carolina in overtime. I don't know much about this game. I just know North Carolina's been kind of collapsing a little bit here. They will still play Clemson in the ACC championship, so we'll see how that goes for them. I think Clemson's going to win, but awesome win for NC State to close out the year. North Carolina, they're going to limp into the ACC championship and probably have a loss. So not a lot to say about this game. Big win for NC State.
Yeah, there's not a lot to say, but North Carolina, the good thing with them is they're 9-3 right now, 6-2 in their conference. If the predictions go the way that we're thinking they are and Clemson wins, Carolina, they're still going to have a really good record of 9-4. I would say, especially for a team like North Carolina that everyone's like, oh, it's a basketball school. Well, they played well this year. They're showing that they are, slightly more than a basketball school at times. They had some good flashes.
North Carolina's been good the past couple of years in football. They've had 8, 9, 10 win seasons.
Yeah, they've been grinding, and they're building a really strong program there. And you get some more recruits, you get some more big games under your belt, and I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the ACC. So props to them for playing well. Yeah, they lost by 3 in overtime to a good NC State team, but they had a great season, and I'm excited to see what bowl game they get and just how well they play. I think depending on who they play, they could get a big win and close out their season on a high note and get ready for next year.
Absolutely. I'm always excited for the bowl games, especially this time of year. We know how good the teams are. We know their placement. We'll see where they go. It's going to be a lot of fun. A few games here we're just going to kind of slide over quickly. UCLA rebounds, gets a big win. Tulane gets a big win. They will play UCF in their conference championship. And then Texas continues rolling, gets another big win, moves to 8-4. Will not play for the Big 12 title, but they'll still get a decent bowl game. So we'll see
Yep.
how they do on that front. Moving on to Saturday. I want to touch on this game for just a minute here. First of all, yes, Georgia stays number one. They got the win here, stayed number one in the rankings. There were a lot of people. This game was going on. Saw that it was 10-7 at halftime. They were all freaking out about like, yeah, look at you, Georgia. You can't. We up 10-7. What is this? And I was like, guys, be patient, okay? Georgia doesn't have to start out up 65-0 to look good, okay? And look at this. They outscored them 27-7 in the second half. Huge win for Georgia. Big statement saying, hey, I don't care what you have to say about me. I'm number one. And number one is here to stay. 37-14 victory over Georgia Tech, keeping them from being bowl eligible. So, heartbreak for Georgia Tech, but a big win for Georgia. They will sit at number one, hopefully until they win the national championship, but I don't know. I'm not willing to make that prediction quite yet. I still got LSU this week, which may not be much of a test now. But regardless, absolutely awesome win for Georgia here, making their statement saying, hey, we're here to stay, baby.
Yeah, great win for Georgia. Yeah, they had a bit of a slow start, but hey, I mean, teams have that, and we've seen it with Georgia a couple times. With some of these games, they tend to come out a little bit slow, which I think depending on who they play, with LSU coming up, and then with whoever they get with the college football playoff, that could be a cause for some slight concern. But the big thing to remember is, let's say Georgia plays against
USC.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll say USC, because right now they're at 4. So they play against USC. Let's say they start off slow and maybe they're down at half. The thing with Georgia is the second half in a lot of these games has been their time.
Yep.
And like I think a key to victory for USC, because at the moment we're just going to pencil them in.
Yeah.
The key to victory for them would be to stifle them in the second half. Because if Georgia comes out slow in the first half, they're going to come out strong in the second. And that should be the game plan for really every team, is if you can keep Georgia dormant in the first half, you better be ready to get them in the second half, because that's the way that you're going to beat this Georgia team. Because if you don't, look at their rushers. They got like their entire team basically rushing. And
yep.
So they got weapons on the on both sides of the ball, but for the offensive side, rushing, they have a lot of different people they can hand the ball off to, to get yards here and there. You have a mobile quarterback, Stetson Bennett had 5 carries for 21 yards, not super impressive, but hey, he's getting yards when they need him to. The receiving's looking really good. Kenny McIntosh is leading that team. Brock Bowers is doing good. He's one of those playmakers that he might not have amazing stats, but he definitely shows up when you need him to. He's a team player. And yeah, this Georgia team, even though it has a slow start, they're looking scary.
Well, and one of the big things to remember about Georgia is the story of Georgia is not their offense. It never has been. The story of Georgia is their defense and holding some of the most high-powered offenses in the land to barely any points. Look what they did against Tennessee not too long ago. And that should scare a team like USC that is so reliant on their passing, and their defense is so lackluster that if they get Georgia in the playoff, I'd be real concerned for them. And I'd be concerned for LSU, who already, as we're going to transition into, beautiful transition by me as always, really good at this. Transition to LSU, man. You guys really had to just not only limp into the SEC championship, but A&M. Dude, A&M's so bad. Why you got to lose to them so badly? This was embarrassing. This was atrociously bad for LSU. They looked horrible. Yeah.
It was not. It wasn't just like, Texas A&M made a winning field goal. No, they beat 38-23.
LSU never led this game.
They beat you by 15 points. Like you just got beat by 15 points by a 4-7 non-bowl eligible, highest recruiting class, super high expectancy team. For those of you that are just listening to this through Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that stuff, I was doing lots of quotations there because everyone talked throughout the season and like preseason and into the first, week or so about Texas A&M. They got a high recruiting class. There's all these expectations. They're a good program. And then we see a 4-7 record, and we're like,
LSU, how are you going to let Devon Kane for A&M rush for 215 yards and 2 touchdowns on you? You are a week out from playing Georgia. You're going to get mollywopped by Georgia.
This dude's putting up some Josh Jacobs numbers
for you, okay? Georgia is opening as a higher point favorite over LSU than Michigan is over Purdue. That's how big the
Really?
spread is. And Michigan is a
Jeez.
16-point favorite.
Wow.
Georgia is opening at a 17.5-point spread in this game. LSU, guys, you're going to get embarrassed this weekend. Ah,
Yeah.
tough for LSU. Anyway, moving on from that, Iron Bowl. I'm not going to talk about this. Alabama won big.
Hey,
They're looking.
props to Auburn though for at least scoring in every quarter and for getting 27 points on them. I mean, I'll give them props for at least that because I
I
thought
won't
it
give
was
them
going to
props
be.
for that. It's Auburn. They look terrible this year. They look terrible in this game.
What I'm saying is,
They
I thought
got
it was
pity
going to be
points.
worse. I thought it was going to be worse.
I honestly didn't see it being much worse than this. So, if anything, I saw it being a little better than this. So, anyway, moving on from that, who wants to smoke that Spencer Rattler pack with me, baby? The South Carolina Gamecocks waving goodbye to Clemson, knocking them out of the playoffs. Last week, knocking Tennessee out of the playoffs. And hey, South Carolina, a couple weeks ago, I called them beating Tennessee, and we didn't get a chance to talk about that. So I said South Carolina is going to beat Tennessee. Tennessee is looking too far ahead. And look what they did. 2 straight wins. They're now ranked at 19th in the playoff rankings. Hey, Spencer Rattler, all of a sudden, when you play teams that don't look very good, looks like a god. So, hey, give me that Spencer Rattler pack, baby. Let's go. South Carolina. Hey, I got a lot of respect. I love South Carolina. They've been playing really well this year. They've been fighting hard in every game they've played. Don't let that 8-4 record fool you. They've looked good in all the games they've played. Clemson, you guys looked like trash here. You guys look like absolute garbage. How are you gonna let you had what, like a 40-game win streak or something at home got snapped here?
Yeah.
Like, that's ridiculous. That's like 7 seasons since you've lost at home. And you just lost to Spencer Rattler? Really? Oh my gosh. Congratulations, South Carolina. What a big win. I was so happy for that for you guys. Moving on from that. Oregon. Oregon. You choked so bad. Oh, you
Big
choked
time
so
choke.
bad. You choked a 34-10 lead or something like that to Oregon. Now, don't get me wrong. Oregon State's great. Love Oregon State. They got a lot of good stuff going on over there. But really, talk about this one.
Yeah, it's one that I know that the players and the staff over there at Oregon are going to be, it's a tough one to swallow for them for sure. Yeah, I mean, blowing a big lead like that, especially to your rivals, is something you don't want to do. Yeah, a lot. I know I was watching College Game Day. A lot of the analysts are picking Oregon State. I personally wouldn't have. If we had picked these games, I would have picked Oregon. I thought Oregon was just a little too much. I thought Bo Nix was a little too much. But I mean, that Oregon State defense really came to play, especially in the second half. And I mean, Bo Nix played a great game, 27 for 41 with 327 yards and 2 touchdowns. His rushing, though, was really what surprised me. He had 3 carries for -5 yards. He was stifled. Oregon State, they pulled the page out of the first half handbook from Ohio State. They knew that Bo Nix was going to run the ball. They knew that he was going to carry the rock, and they shut him down throughout the entire game. So props to them. Noah Whittington for Oregon had a pretty good game, had a touchdown and 81 yards. Ben Goberson for Oregon State. I mean, an okay stat line, I guess, if you want to give him that. 6 of 13, 60 yards, and then 2 interceptions. So there's that. But the big story for them was a rushing. That's really where Oregon State got their fuel from. It actually looks a lot like Georgia's with how many people they have. But Damian Martinez, 15 carries, 103 yards. Good for him. Deshaun Fenwick had a touchdown. Let's see. And then Ben Goberson, he might not have had any throwing touchdowns, but he's got 2 rushing touchdowns. So good for him. And then Isaiah Newell also carrying the rock for 2 touchdowns. I mean, they rushed for 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. Their rushing attack was dirty. Oregon, their defense couldn't stop it. I mean, there's not a whole lot to say other than, I mean, it was a great game, but it's going to leave a bad taste in Oregon's mouth I'll tell you what, I am scared for next year when Oregon plays against Oregon State at home. That's going to be a big game for Oregon. I would not be surprised, depending on how the teams are looking throughout the season. It's still way too early for a prediction, but I'm saying don't be surprised if it is a massive, I wouldn't say massive blow, but if there's a lot of points scored just because of how bad Oregon's going to want to win next year.
Well, and something else to think about is Oregon State's on the upswing. Like they've been looking a lot better as years have gone on. And Oregon won't have Bo Nix next year. So I think they could be on a little bit of a downturn. You never know. I mean, Oregon's down years are 8-4 at this point, so I'm not super concerned about that. But man, you had a 34-10 lead and an open goal for the Pac-12 championship, and you just choked it away, leaving the door nice and open for Utah to get its second shot and knocking out USC. Ohio State fans are going to be the biggest Utah fans in the world this weekend. You better believe that. Penn State gets a big win here, 10-2. They are in that number 8 spot. Now what you all been waiting for. Now what everybody's been waiting for. You've been waiting for us to talk about. Okay.
Go Blue, baby.
I know I'm going to let you have your moment to talk about this game. Now, first things first, mad respect for Michigan for this game. What a performance by Michigan. Donovan Edwards looked amazing. Cornelius Johnson was ridiculous. JJ McCarthy, okay. I mean, 12 for 24 is not great, but lots of yards, lots of passing touchdowns. Made the throws that he needed to when he needed to. Awesome job, Michigan. Looked amazing this game. I want to talk for a minute because it's been 2 years in a row now that Ohio State has dropped the ball massively. And there's a lot of people in the sports media world that seem to be very quick to want to write Ohio State out and be like, hey, Michigan's the preeminent program in the Big Ten now. Ohio State's not that good. Hold on, guys, okay? Ohio State's still went 11-0 all the way to the Michigan game. Now, yes, there were glaring problems, and there's a lot of questions about Ryan Day coaching against Michigan. It's been his first 2 years. He's had 2 L's to Michigan. But that being said, who was ranked higher all year? These teams were both undefeated. Who was ranked higher all year? Ohio State. Who had the tougher schedule? Ohio State. Who had better wins going into this game? Ohio State. Michigan is number 2. I think Michigan, if you look at just the way they played this weekend versus like Georgia, they deserve to be number 1, 100%. The thing that's keeping Michigan out of that number 1 spot is their non-conference schedule. Because their non-conference schedule was so weak, so piss poor, that they don't have any of those signature wins that Ohio State does. Ohio State has the win over Notre Dame. Ohio State walked into Penn State and got a win. Michigan just beat a lot of good teams at home. It's not to discount Michigan. They just walked into Ohio State and won. They deserve to be number 2. They deserve to be in the playoff. I'm not discounting that. My point is, with Ohio State having everything better than Michigan this year, aside from this game, I don't want to hear anybody tell me it's not still the preeminent program in the Big Ten. They absolutely are. It is. We have reached a point where it's undisputed number 1 and 2, where it's Ohio State, Michigan, and then everybody else. I will give you that. But Michigan has not eclipsed Ohio State yet in terms of who is, like, when you say Big Ten, what program do you think of in football? Even as a Michigan fan, you think Ohio State. It's your first thought. Who's the preeminent Big Ten program? Ohio State Buckeyes. Hasn't changed yet. Again, if you ask who's the number 2, it's Michigan by a long shot. Penn State 3, maybe. But you can interchange a lot from there. Other than that, Ohio State's here to stay. They'll be here for a long time. They will rebound. Frankly, there's still a good chance they make the playoff. They're at number 5 right now. If USC or TCU lose, hey, Ohio State's getting that spot. If Michigan loses, if all 3 of them lose, we got a lot of explosions on our hands. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to Austin, let him talk about this one because I know he wants to so bad. Big win for Michigan here. And hey, they've got all but a spot locked in the playoff unless those nasty spoiler makers come knocking.
Yeah. Just a great game overall. I'll be totally honest. I thought Ohio State was going to win. I thought it was going to be a close game. I thought it was going to be really competitive. And it definitely was, at least for the first half. But I didn't, I was hoping for Michigan to win. I was, rooting, my butt off for them, but I didn't really think it was going to happen. But I'll tell you what, the thing with Ohio State is, the first half, they knew what they were doing. They stifled the run. And because they know last year, Hassan Haskins rushed for 297 yards or something and had like 5 touchdowns. So they weren't about to let that happen again, especially at home and especially on their senior day. They were not going to let Michigan run all over them. And so that forced J.J. McCarthy to pass the ball. The issue is, and I've talked about this with several people, Ohio State, to stop the run, they basically just, went on Madden, they took the little controllers and they ran commit.
Yeah.
And when you do that, for those of you who play Madden, you know what happens. It leaves wide open bombs over the top. That's why we saw a 75-yard and a 65-yard touchdown pass from J.J. McCarthy.
Yep.
Because Ohio State just left the door open over the top. They weren't covering the receivers well enough. They were too focused on the run of Donovan Edwards since Blake Corum was out. The second half, they started to kind of scoot back a little bit and say, okay, we don't want to get shelled over the top anymore. And that opened up the running lane, which is then why you see Donovan Edwards with 22 carries for 216 yards and 2 touchdowns with a long of 85 yards, because he had a 75-yard touchdown and then like the very next possession had an 85-yard touchdown, like the exact same run play. And so I agree with you 100%. I think Ohio State is like that first program, the premier program of the Big Ten is what you think of. I don't think Michigan's passed them yet. I think that you're 100% right about strength of schedule. I think that Michigan had it a little bit easier in the beginning. And I think that really it helped them get off to a good start. But at the same time, it also didn't help them because, if they played a little bit tougher teams and won, they might have they might have been able to get above Ohio State or potentially above Georgia, especially now. But the thing is that this was a huge win for Michigan.
Yeah.
Not just the fact that they beat them for the first time back-to-back since 1999 and 2000, but the fact they went into the Horseshoe, one of the hardest places to play in the Big Ten.
Yep.
And first half, only were down by 3, and they came out in the second half and they held Ohio State 3 points and just absolutely clobbered them. And they ended up taking a massive dub. Jim Harbaugh knows what he's doing right now. This Michigan team knows what they're doing. They were on a mission. They accomplished it. And hey, Ohio State, they're a tough team. They're a great team. They really took it. They took it to Michigan. They gave their all.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, like you said, with them potentially still being in the playoff, I can definitely see it. And there's not a whole lot to say other than, this game was outstanding. Even though it was a second half blowout, it was just an outstanding game to watch both teams go at it. Both teams were fighting, giving their all. Both quarterbacks played well. The rushing for both teams was guys have watched it probably. Michigan 45, Ohio State 23 is the final. And then we're going to get to see Michigan against Purdue. This is going to be interesting. Well, when we get to talking about the predictions and get to that game, we're going to have a couple things to say about that, but
we are going to have a couple things. But yeah, absolutely incredible game there. Michigan with a big win. Props to you guys. Okay. Props to Michigan. Absolutely incredible. Getting that spot in the playoff more than deserved. Moving forward quickly here, TCU handles business, moves to 12-0. Excuse me. They get K-State this weekend. Can't wait to see that game. That's going to be so much fun.
Big game.
USC also handles business against Notre Dame. Gets that win. Puts themselves in the playoff. Please give Caleb Williams the Heisman. Just give it to him. He deserves it. 18 for 22, 232 and a touchdown, and then 9 carries for 35 yards and 3 touchdowns. Caleb Williams is that offense. It starts and it ends with Caleb Williams. There is nobody else out there on that field aside from him. He does everything, and he more than proved it this this game. I do think the offense relying so much on him could be a detriment come playoff time if they get there, but that's something we'll worry about for future USC, not now USC. And their defense is still kind of looking like a very B minus defense, which going against teams like Georgia or Michigan, that's going to hurt them. Going up against teams like that, high caliber teams where it's just A's across the board.
Yep.
But nothing to discount USC here. Big win for them. Setting themselves up, got their rematch, looking for revenge against Utah this Friday night, the Pac-12 championship, and we'll see what goes down there.
Well, I actually have something to say. I was going to say,
yes.
I think that, honestly, I don't think that Caleb Williams should get the Heisman. I think it needs to go to Aiden O'Connell.
Okay. Well, Tennessee, without Hendon Hooker, gets a big win over Vanderbilt. Keeps Vanderbilt from getting bowl eligible. Kansas State wins their game, gets themselves in the Big 12 championship, and a big rematch against TCU. That's going to be a heck of a game. I'm so excited. That is a sleeper, definitely, for game of the week this week.
Oh, yeah.
Coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Washington moves to 10-2. They will not play in the Pac-12 championship, but they do get a big win here. Awesome game for Michael Penix Jr. Utah cruises their way to a win and into the Pac-12 championship against USC.
RIP Colorado.
RIP Colorado. Wow, 1-11. They're trying to get Coach Primetime, so we'll see what happens with that. UCF, they will get a rematch against Tulane in their conference championship this week. And then Kentucky beats Louisville. I'm sure. Now, Will Levis still isn't very good. And everybody's like, oh, top 10 quarterback. Yeah, there's no good quarterbacks. Yeah, he'll definitely be a top 10 quarterback. It's not top 10 in the draft. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Will, the only reason I see him going top 10 is he's like a Lions pick. Like the Lions would pick Will Levis.
Yeah, that's true.
The Lions would see CJ Stroud and Bryce Young and pick Will Levis as the one
fair.
in that group. Like, I don't know what we're talking about here. And that's the NFL. We're not worried about that. One thing I do want to talk about, of course, is the final standings for game picks. Here they are after week 12.
Minus last week since we weren't able to.
Minus last week. But again, the only reason I don't think it would have been much different, I don't think we would have had many different picks last week.
Yeah, we probably would have had a lot of the same ones, but
the games were very straightforward. And I would have had a 4-game lead going into it. So you would have had to make a lot of crazy picks. But yeah, I took a big dub in week 12. I got Louisville over NC State and South Carolina over Tennessee. You'd miss both of those. So I got the big win here. So I will take the regular season dub for game picks for college football. I'm big dubs here. We will reset. And thank you. Yes, bow to me. Bow to me. I am the champion, as you can tell. We will reset and do fresh game picks for the postseason, for the bowl games. So you will see who gets those games right, who gets those games wrong, and who will come out on top in those games. I cannot wait for that. That
awesome.
Hopefully will be completely announced and ready to go by next week. Like by this point next week, we will have the actual college football playoff, New Year's 6 bowls all announced on the table for us to talk about next week. I am so stoked for that. But that's next week. We got one more week to talk about here in college football. And that, of course, is conference championship week 14 of college football season. I let my computer load because it is being very slow. But we are moving on to conference championship game picks, presented as always by Sprite Cranberry. Sprite Cranberry, of course, the sponsor of game picks. I won't be keeping track of these. I'm not too concerned about that. We're just going to do this for fun. See who wins, break down the games, talk about it. Starting off hot Friday night, the new number 4 team in the nation, USC, gets their revenge shot against Utah in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, Nevada. Huge matchup here. USC playing for that last playoff spot. They want to prove. Lincoln Riley in his first year's got a lot to prove. So does Caleb Williams. I am going to go ahead and pick USC to win this game. I think USC does get their revenge against Utah in a shootout barn burner, where USC gets the win. Over under 67, take the over.
Yeah, for real.
You
I
agree?
got to agree with you. I mean,
Beautiful.
I
I
think
love it.
Utah's going to play. I think Utah's going to play well. I think they're going to really try and pressure Williams and put some make him make some tough decisions. See if he'll mess up. But I think USC, especially with the big win they just had, with the way Caleb Williams has been playing, I think they're going to come in strong and squeak one out from Utah.
Absolutely, I can see that. Of course, somehow the biggest spread of the weekend for conference championships, LSU Georgia. Georgia opening as 17.5 point favorites over LSU. I am more than okay with that. I think Georgia wins this one pretty easily. If LSU had won this past week, that's a different story. If they had looked good. LSU has not looked good the last couple weeks. I am picking Georgia to win by pretty handily.
Yeah, there's not much to say about this. Regardless of if it's, I mean, the only real difference that people might say about this is, oh, I think LSU is going to come on, with a fire, under them because of these losses they've been having, and they want to, prove themselves, as much as they can here in this final game. So they're going to keep it close. I mean, regardless of if you think that or if you think that it's going to be a blowout, either way, Georgia's going to win.
The big thing here, even if LSU wins, I don't think that'll be enough to keep Georgia out of the playoff. I don't see, if Georgia loses this game, they'll fall to 4, or they'll fall to like 3 like they did last year when they lost. They'll still be in the playoff, undefeated in the regular season, win over Tennessee to keep them in there. That'll keep Georgia looking good going forward. Lucas Oil Stadium Saturday night. Purdue and Michigan in the Big Ten Championship. Michigan opening as 16.5 point favorites. Because picks don't matter, I'm picking Purdue. I think the spoiler makers. This is a legit pick. I am going to pick Purdue here. I don't.
Hey,
I don't necessarily think they will
I
win.
respect it.
I don't necessarily think they'll win. I think it would be hilarious though. Like Purdue has everything to. Purdue has nothing to lose here.
Yeah.
So Purdue will come out there with everything they have, every trick play in their book, who knows what Purdue's got cooking, and they will look good in this game. I'm picking Purdue to pull the upset and chaos to ensue in the playoff world.
Yeah. So the last time that Purdue and Michigan played in a football game was September 23rd of 2017.
And Purdue lost.
And it was 28-10, Michigan at home. Purdue lost at home that game. Yeah, no real surprise there. It's Purdue.
Yeah.
Now Purdue this
2017
year.
Purdue. That's bad Purdue.
Yeah. Well, Purdue's got. I mean, they have a pretty good team. I mean, they've had the ups and downs. Obviously, being 8-4 right now. Definitely, I think should have. I think that record doesn't truly reflect how good Purdue is. Several of those games they could have and should have won. But there's mistakes here and there that really cost it for them. I think that Michigan will take this. However, I'm not going to say it's going to be a 16.5 spread.
Oh, no, I don't think so either.
I think that Purdue, with the talent that they have, and I mean, their nickname, the Spoiler Makers, I don't think they're going to win, but I think that they're going to keep it close, at least for the first half. I'd say at least for the first half, maybe even throughout the second. I think they're going to, play well. But I think that Michigan's rushing attack along with their passing attack is going to be just a little bit too much for Purdue. And yeah, I'm going to take Michigan on this one.
There's only a couple outcomes I see in this game. I'm going to bounce these off you real quick.
Okay.
Number one, Michigan looks like Michigan. They absolutely mollywop Purdue. That's outcome number one.
Yep.
Outcome number two, Michigan wins by anywhere from 1 to 3 points. Like it is a barn burner.
Yep.
Or number three, because it's the other side, Purdue mollywops Michigan. Like we have a Purdue Ohio State kind of repeat thing here. Like if this is a close game, I don't see Purdue pulling it out. I think Purdue, if they want to win this game, they'll come out on fire and just not stop. So that's what I see happening in this game.
Yeah, I could. I'm going to agree with you. I could see any one of those happening.
When Purdue plays good teams, especially like that Ohio State game a few years ago, Purdue just goes on the gas and they don't let up, and they win pretty big against Ohio State a few years back. Obviously, against Michigan State last year, had that huge win at home against Michigan State.
Yep.
I don't know, man.
And here's the other thing. I know there are a lot of Purdue students that were tweeting at the at the committee, just telling them, do not rank Purdue for this week. Do not rank them because we want to go in against a number 2 because we saw when Purdue played a number 2, Iowa, away, they beat them. Now, this is essentially a home game for Purdue. That's, but I mean, they're going up against the number 2. I don't know,
Unranked.
man.
We've done that against Iowa. We've done that against Ohio State. We've won both times.
Here's what I think personally. I think Purdue does match up well with Michigan in terms of just general spread. I think that with the way that Purdue's defense can play, I think that they can definitely match up with Michigan well. The thing is that it's just Michigan is just they're a strong team, but I think that Michigan, like this game, like obviously, yes, they want to win. They want to, stay undefeated. They want to, really secure their spot in the college football playoff. And, they're looking for a back-to-back Big Ten title. However, I think that if Purdue wins this, I think Michigan still retains their place in the college football playoff. I think that they would probably put in at a 4, depending on how the other games go, maybe a 3. So I don't really think Michigan has like a ton to lose. So it's not like they're coming in here like, oh my goodness, we gotta, go.
Yeah.
They're gonna come in and they're gonna play their game. Purdue is the team right now that says, hey, like, we're gonna be in a bowl game, but how do we want to end this season right now? End our Big Ten season, I should say. How do we want to end this? Do we want to end it out on fire? I think so. I think they're all saying this is what the fans deserve. And so that's what I was saying. I think it's going to be a close game.
The big thing to think about here is when it was a couple weeks ago, week 12, and, Michigan squeaked by Illinois and Ohio State squeaked by Maryland. You could tell they were both looking past those two teams towards that Michigan-Ohio State game. Well, Michigan's past the Ohio State game. What are they looking to now? Oh, they're looking to the playoff. They know where they're going. This is not a Purdue team to overlook.
Oh, yeah.
And like Michigan State, Iowa, Ohio State, all these teams in the past. Look what happens when they've overlooked Purdue. When Purdue is coming in here, like, hey, don't forget about us, guys, okay? We are a giant killer. That is our thing. That's our mantra. I don't know, man. I could very easily see Michigan winning this game, absolutely. But I don't think anyone will talk about this game enough this week as a potential upset. No one will. Everybody says Michigan's going to win big. I don't know, man. Watch out for Purdue. This will be a closer game than people think. This will be a tough game, and I could very easily see Purdue winning. You never know.
I'll tell you what. I'm gonna be the conflicted fan, being both a fan of Michigan and Purdue. So I'm gonna tell people now. It won't be too
conflicting for me.
I'm going to be cheering for whenever there's a big play. I'm admitting that now. If Michigan throws a 75-yard bomb down the field, I'm going crazy. If Purdue gets a big interception or a hit stick fumble or something, I'm going crazy. I'm just going to be cheering. I'm hoping it's a great game. That's the thing that I care about most.
Yes.
And as long as one of these teams wins, which is going to happen, thank goodness.
Wow, really?
So
somebody's going to win?
Yeah, we're golden.
I thought they were going to tie. Oh, was the NFL?
We're golden. No, we're golden.
Okay, cool. We're golden free balls. Clemson and North Carolina. I'm going to gloss over this one. I think Clemson will pull this one out. It's the ACC championship. It's basically like a home game for Clemson every year. Clemson's going to win this one. Yeah, that's about it.
Yep.
Kansas State and TCU. Oh, boy. Game of the week, in my opinion. This game has the closest spread of any of the other games this week. Number 3. Oh, yeah, Kansas State was number 10. That's who number 10 was that I said we didn't care about. Kansas State. Here's the deal. Okay. First of all, I'll say my scenario in a minute after we talk about this game. I'm picking TCU to win. I think TCU knows what they're playing for, knows where they want to go, and knows that if they lose, they'll be overtaken by Ohio State. So I'm picking TCU to win, stay undefeated, keep their spot in the college football playoff, and erase all the disrespect we had 7 years ago when Ohio State went in over them. TCU does not want to fall to Ohio State again. I'm picking TCU.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you 100%. I think that the spread is perfect. I think that Kansas State, with the defense they have, I think they're going to be they're kind of in like the Purdue situation, if you will, where they're like, they're, you can call them the spoiler makers, because they're coming in, they're looking to knock that TCU down a peg.
Kansas State
And
wants revenge.
Kansas State, they want revenge, and they want to knock a big school or a big team, that's ranked really well right now and it's had great success. They want to knock them down a peg. They want to. That's what they want. So I think Kansas State's going to come out with a fire underneath them. But I think that Max Duggan and TCU are going to be just a little bit too much. I think that the first half, we might see a Kansas State, kind of big jump out. We might see them lead by a couple scores or keep the score close at least. But I think that when it comes to the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, I think that's where we're going to really see Kansas State kind of start to downgrade a little bit. I think they're going to get tired trying to keep up with TCU with that rushing attack and the passing attack. I think TCU is gonna pull it out right there. I think.
I could see it. You never know. And then just real quick, I'll touch on this. UCF Tulane. I picked UCF last time to beat Tulane, and they did. I'm sticking with them. Sticking with the Knights. UCF wins the AAC championship in an awesome game there. So here's what I want to propose to you, good sir.
Okay.
If you look at who the teams are playing this week, it is not very far-fetched. I'd say I would almost go on the limb of saying likely that USC, Michigan, and TCU all lose. Because we've seen that possibility. We know Utah can beat USC. We've seen it before. Mm-hmm. I think Kansas State could get their revenge. We saw how this worked last time. Deuce Vaughn's been insane for Kansas State. And then, the spoiler makers are always spoiling people's hopes and dreams. So what do you do if you got Michigan loses, SC loses, TCU loses, and you got one loss Ohio State sitting out there, got two loss Alabama sitting out there, you got Clemson's too far out, they're not going to make it. But here's where I see this going if this happens, okay? Let's say all three of those teams lose, okay? I'm thinking you got Georgia number 1, obviously.
Yep.
You got, as much as I hate to say it, this will make sense later. I'm putting like Ohio State at number 2. Let me finish here. I'm putting Alabama 3 and Michigan 4.
Okay.
Here's why. Because USC will be their second loss. They're out. They're gone. Alabama gets his jump over them. TCU's been disrespected all year, and a loss here will almost certainly add to that. And Michigan, I think Michigan is in that spot where they're safe no matter what, especially if teams below them lose. If Michigan loses and TCU and USC win, then I might get a little hairy. But even then, they've got the tiebreaker win over Ohio State, so it's not going to matter. So I think Michigan's a pretty solid lock no matter what. It doesn't matter their spot. But that pesky Alabama, they will not go away. And frankly, who wouldn't want a Georgia-Michigan semifinal and an Ohio State-Alabama semifinal? Who wouldn't want that? Let's be honest here. I would want that. And then you got TCU at 5, USC at 6. That's their whole thing. Like, I hate that because I don't want Alabama anywhere near the playoff this year. But I'm just saying, this could get ugly. This could get real ugly real fast.
Yeah, it's difficult because for me, it's hard to rationalize them putting Ohio State above Michigan just because Michigan has that win over them.
Sure.
But if Michigan loses, the only way that you could drop Michigan and put Ohio State in but keep them under would be to put Michigan 3, Ohio State 4. And I don't think they do that.
Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that because
I don't think they put Alabama at 2. So it's like, it's just a very interesting circumstance that we're in because you have to think about not only like, the wins and losses, but you got to think about who's beaten who's lost to who, who's looked good, who has, star talent, there's lots of aspects. So
You know,
I don't know.
the other
It'll
thing we
be
didn't consider is, let's say all three of those teams lose, they could very easily just keep Michigan at 2. If all three
they
of those
could.
teams lose, then they can move Alabama in there and Ohio State in there, or keep TCU and Ohio State or something like that. I don't know, but
What do you think might happen with Tennessee?
Tennessee,
Because they do have that win over Alabama.
right? But they're already ranked below. That should have come into play here.
Yeah, I agree.
Like
That's why I was curious if you had any
yeah,
thoughts.
Tennessee has no shot. Like the committee has proven that they value Alabama more than Tennessee, regardless of the head-to-head. Like the
Yep,
head-to-head should be a factor right there, and is not.
I agree.
So, like Alabama, people don't want to admit it, but Alabama's still got a very real shot at the playoff if a lot of chaos happens, and that should scare you. Now, yes, this Alabama team is not as good as they've been in the past, but if you have Michigan, TCU, and USC, if USC loses, they're out. Like that's a given.
Yep.
Then it becomes, who do you put in, Ohio State or Alabama? Ohio State has first dibs. They have first dibs on that number 4 spot. So then you'd have Michigan, TCU, and then like Georgia, Ohio State. That'd be sick, Georgia and Ohio State.
That'd be sick.
It'd be a sick game. I wanted that last year, but we didn't get it.
Hey, you know what? If that's the case, I would love to see a Georgia versus TCU or a Georgia Michigan final. But take this. Let's say that chaos ensues, and in the way that we get it, the final playoff that comes out is Georgia 1, Michigan 2,
okay,
TCU 3, or if you want to flip Michigan, TCU, you can. Doesn't really matter. It's 2 and 3, and then 4th is Ohio State.
Michigan, Ohio State national championship.
Michigan, Ohio
I know where
State
you're going with that.
For the national championship. Do you know
the country couldn't handle that,
and how crazy that game would be? Like
that game would be insane. That game would be insane.
Like Michigan, Ohio State is a crazy game every year, and especially the past couple of years. But like Ohio State just lost to Michigan.
Yeah.
If somehow they get into college football and they end up playing Michigan,
I would be petrified if I was a Michigan fan and that happened.
Oh my gosh, I would be. I mean, you have to be. Here's the thing: you have to be petrified for me no matter what. Because one, if you're a Michigan fan, yeah, you just beat Ohio State, but now Ohio State going to be working on things. They're going to come out with like an even bigger fire because they're like, we just lost at home on senior day.
And do you really want to face an Ohio State team that just beat Georgia?
Yeah, exactly.
What?
That's the other aspect. But
like
then
we saw last year what happened when Georgia played Michigan. Okay, we saw what happened. Michigan got mollywopped by Georgia.
Yep.
Like that was such a fun game, by the way, for me at least, because I just got to watch Georgia clap Michigan. It was beautiful.
Yourself.
But like,
here's the thing, though.
If I'm Michigan, the one team I do not want to play in the national championship is Ohio State. That's the one team I don't want to play.
Let me tell you this: if you're a Michigan or if you're a Ohio State fan though, and you happen to be playing Michigan for a national championship, the thing that's got to be in the back of your mind is, are we about to lose to them for a third straight time?
No, I don't think Ohio State would lose to Michigan a third straight time.
I don't think it will
happen.
So either. I don't
Especially
think so
now. Here's the thing: if it's a year from now they play for a third time, I could see it. Not this year. I don't see them losing twice in 1 year. No.
I don't either.
Like Ohio State will look at that film for 42 hours a day.
Yep.
Figure out what they did wrong and fix it. I know there's 24 hours in the day. I don't care. Ohio State will figure it out a way to do it.
Yes, I agree 100%.
So Michigan, you better be rooting for USC this week. And Ohio State, you better be rooting for Utah this week because you guys... I'm just saying, I might be a Utah fan this week. You never know. Hey, I'm a chaos fan, okay? I love me some chaos no matter what. I think Georgia is the safest pick, relatively speaking, this week in terms of the game they have. But, imagine Georgia being the only undefeated team left Like, Georgia could be the only undefeated team in 5 days.
Or think about this. What if out of these playoff games, Georgia is the only team that loses?
Ooh. That's a good
Ooh,
one. Well, if Georgia's the only one that loses, they just go to 4 and everybody else moves up 1.
yeah.
They're not putting Ohio State in over Georgia. They're not
Oh
going to
no,
do
here we
that.
go. We got everybody loses.
Everybody loses. Then it stays, well, no. Everybody
No,
loses. It stays the same aside from USC and Ohio State flip. That's it.
here's what I think is going to happen. If everybody loses, they're just going to give the championship trophy to Alabama. I mean, and then they're just going to call it. They're just going to say, "There's your college football
Probably.
playoff."
Probably.
You guys can watch highlights on YouTube, and you guys can just listen here as we give the trophy to Alabama. Congratulations, next season. Come on.
All 4 of the top 4 lose. All right, so the national championship is going to be Ohio State versus Alabama. The game everybody wants. Let's go. No one wants that.
We
No
don't
one
want a
wants
repeat of
Ohio
that.
State and Alabama in the national championship.
We don't want a repeat of that.
No. Like, Ohio State has a good chance of getting to the championship if they get in, but who knows?
Who knows?
There's a lot to decipher there. We got let's see. 3 days until we know where USC is going. We got 4 days until we know where everybody else is going. Yeah, then in 5 days. 5 days from now, start the countdown. We will know the college football playoff. We will know the New Year's Six bowls. And we will be right here next week to talk to you all about it as always. Whew. It's been a heck of a season. What's up?
I was going to say, everybody out there watching, listening, be prepared, because now that college football is getting ready to come to a close soon, you know what's coming on. Yes, Kale's been doing the motion for those of you that aren't watching it. He's shooting a basketball.
College basketball, baby.
Purdue is looking unbelievable. The Big Ten is looking unbelievable.
I'm sorry. Who's the number 5 team in the nation? Who's number 5?
Boiler up. But let me tell you this, for everybody that's watching, listening, that's not what we're here for right now, though. We're here for college football. It's not over yet. But believe me, the moment that thing's over, we're doing a nice, smooth, easy transition right into basketball season. So keep your eyes out for that content coming as well as other content. But hey, oh my gosh, I can't even with how crazy the schedule is going to be these next few days.
We are stoked. We are ready to bring this content to you guys. I'm hoping to have my voice back all the way soon so I can get even more hype. I'm trying to bring the energy as best I can. But that is going to be it. We got 1 week left of college football, baby, until we head to the postseason. And it's about to be a hectic one. Ladies and gentlemen, you know where to find your one-stop shop for all your college football content is right here on the CH Gaming channel, right here on the From the Student Section podcast. And we will be here next week to talk about the college football playoff and everything that went down. We will see you guys next week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy football this weekend. Peace.
Peace.